The Secret Podcast. The Secret Gallery.
Welcome to The Secret Podcast. I'm Chris Minnick. I'm here, as always, with Philip Barasch, and today we're going to be talking with painter Michael Orwick. And the Secret Gallery Podcast is brought to you today, as always, by Sweet Relief Cannabis, located here in lovely downtown Astoria. And you can go to sweetrelief420.com to sign up for their email list to get updated specials and promotions. We're really excited about talking with Michael today, and so without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Philip. Take it away, Philip.
All right. Well, Michael, welcome. I'm very excited about talking with you, and I'll let you know again, it's a beautiful day here, and it's going to be a great day to be talking to you about landscapes because I'm looking out the window at a great landscape that I happen to know you were born in the landscape I'm looking at. So what I really want to start with is I want to start with your signature. And I want to start with your signature, which is also, it's the logo on your website because it is very Japanese chop signature oriented to me. And what I mean by that specifically is it has a vertical orientation. It has the two components to a Japanese chop, which would be the hanko, which is the stamping object, and the inkin, which is the impression. In this case, the stamping object would be the paintbrush, and the impression would be the paint. And I believe that you developed that signature as a means of indicating to the viewer that when your painting was done, it is for this purpose only, that you are sealing the image. So I want you to speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, very observant. It's pretty much all completely right. I try really to avoid prematurely signing my paintings. And there are times when I go back and rework them, I have to paint over the signature or whatnot. But I really do try to avoid signing it until, I've even hung it on the wall. Oftentimes I'll be signing it after it's even been framed just to really see how it looks and to make sure that it is complete. And you're right. It's just kind of a way of signing it, blowing it a kiss and wishing it the best of luck as I send it out into the world. The signature developed a long time ago for me, probably in about the fourth grade. My family had quite a bit of different paintings around the house, and across the hallway from my bedroom were a number of etchings by the artist Albrecht Dürer. And his signature is this beautiful A and D. And so I actually thought that that's what an artist's signature was meant to be, was just the initials. And so probably starting in the third grade, I just started playing with that, different designs, hiding the M within the O and different things. And I came up with this kind of stack of the M on top of the O within a kind of a horizontal box format. And in my early thinking, the M represented mountains, the peaks, and the O represented kind of a lake at the base of the mountains. And growing up in the Pacific Northwest, it seemed completely reasonable and my love of nature. So it's kind of a strange thing to just go, man, I've been literally signing, back then it would have been, superheroes and everything else, all the way till now where I'm painting these landscapes, atmospheric, Pacific Northwest landscapes, still with the same print or chop or whatever you'd like to call it, signature.
Well, there's another thing, and since you brought it up, we're going to just talk about it now because there's echoes within your chop, and that is that in the tradition of Chinese landscape painting, which landscapes are the top of the hierarchy of Chinese painting, there's the tradition of looking to heaven because it's good for the soul. And you were just talking about the M and the O as mountains and water, which is the literal translation of Chinese landscapes in terms of how they look at the actual landscape. So Chinese landscape paintings are very idealized. And when I was reading about them, they're often called wandering while lying down. And so the reason I wanted to start off with your signature is there's already a whole bunch of stuff in there that speaks to the kind of paintings you do. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that? There's a lot of Oriental references in there, and we've only gotten to your signature at this point, but I just think that the signature the signature is the final flourish of your finished pieces. And you're referencing these Oriental traditions that speak to landscape. So I would like you to talk a little bit about that.
Okay, I'm going to try to live up to that question now and make myself sound as wise as that is. Because as I said, it's kind of a fourth grader's approach to this. And then it just stuck. I didn't know that until literally 30 seconds ago. So I appreciate you kind of educating me on that. And I love it. And I'm going to, embrace it all the more because of that. And it is kind of funny that it just kind of ended up happening in that way, that it is about exploring the landscape for me. I mean, that's what my paintings are about, and about, to a degree, an idolized representation of, our beautiful light and atmosphere that we have here in the Pacific Northwest, and really playing that up. And then also, within the Asian traditions, we have the meditation, we have the Zen, we have the calm. I love watching the videos of the gentlemen doing the circles. I cannot remember what they're called right now, with their big brushes and just kind of the Japanese calligraphy.
Are you talking about the mandalas?
Yeah, exactly. And just that kind of that focus, but at the same time giving up to chance. And it's this kind of duality and partnership of intention and chance. And I think, that's definitely a more enjoyable way to paint, is to have your intention going in and almost be having this conversation with, your mediums, with the subject, with whatever's going on in your head and the canvas, and just kind of, as Bob Ross would say, kind of inviting those happy accidents. And there's a lot of times when the paint knows better what it wants to do, and the painting, inevitably changes and morphs, and you just start responding to what's happening. That's a bit of a deviation, but I could see a lot of things that could relate to the Japanese culture. And in fact, I even called one of my series of paintings Zenscapes.
Yes.
Because that's really what I was after. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to talk about that since you brought it up. So Zenscape. So Zen in Buddhism is religious enlightenment by meditation in which there's no consciousness of self. You're free from mind attachment. So when I'm looking at those paintings in particular, since you called them Zenscapes, then you can't escape the fact that you're talking about not being mindful, literally mindful of what you're doing, that you're actually in the process of painting. And I will take it to the next step and say that if there is mindfulness in those series, and I would say for basically all of your paintings, is that it's the mindfulness of beauty. So is that, I would like you to speak to that.
Yeah, man, you are really astute. You're exactly right that for me, it is the pursuit of beauty and the pursuit of peace and the pursuit of calm. My whole studio is kind of built around this now, where it's just the music I listen to or the, audiobooks I listen to while working are very much reinforcing this idea. No, I don't listen to loud music and stuff like I used to when I was younger painting. It's a lot of acoustic acoustic guitar or just piano music. Very meditational, very minimalist paint music. And I love the conversation that you're having with the painting. And I paint on actually quite a few paintings at a time. So when I walk into my studio, there'll be about 5 to 20 paintings kind of leaned up against the walls in different states of finish. And I almost just walk in and just kind of like, okay, which of you guys wants to play today? Who wants to, have this conversation? Who wants to talk?
I would like to just follow up a little bit, Michael, since there was some really interesting stuff you were talking about. So I just want to get back into the idea that, when you're free from mind attachment, which I felt very strongly, particularly about your Zenscapes, but also I think pretty much about all of your work, that there seems to be some level of mind attachment, which allows you to get to a point of being meditative. So meditation, I feel, figures very strongly into what you do. And so am I correct on that?
Yeah, I've often said, I'm not very religious or anything, but I've often said that painting is kind of my form of prayer and also my form of meditation. I'm working on becoming a better meditator over the last number of years, but I would definitely say I'm better at meditating while painting than I am while just sitting still in a chair or on the floor. And it is interesting how you can just kind of go to these places of quiet. And yeah, I mean, paintings are funny because they're extensions of yourself, but they're also like this second identity or second person or thing that you're having this relationship with and this conversation with. And so I like that idea of kind of this mutual meditation or mutual Zen together with this surface. And I do a lot of work on the academic side of it in the beginning. So I'll do little sketches and, like I said, gather up references and different things. And I try to build up a foundation so that I can be comfortable in the experimentation and in the allowing the painting to kind of lead the way. So by building a foundation that I feel is strong, I can then play a lot more freely. And I guess also it's that detachment. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it also strikes me that you're not concerned really with identifying specific locales. I mean, one of the things that strikes me about your work is that location is secondary if it matters at all, because what you're really interested in is the exploration of either meditation or the exploration of the beauty of location that's not specific to the location. So I know that some of the images that you have, they're identified as to where they are, but to my eye, that isn't important. That maybe you're using the titles as a means of cataloging the image as opposed to saying that I'm trying in some way to capture the essence or the beauty of a particular landscape. Is that going on in your process?
It does, yeah. And there are pieces that are much more identifiable and where I'll stick, much truer to the image. If I do work for a number of vineyards and things like that. And so, of course, then you want it to look like the place. If it's going to go on their wine label or if, they're going to use it on their website or in their showroom. And then there's also iconic imagery like Haystack Rock or Mount Hood or the Gorge, where, you have leeway, you can change things up. But I find like in the structure of the thing, and this would be kind of what I was talking about the academic, I may draw Haystack Rock so that it is pretty much perfectly representing the rock, but then I'm free in the things that move in the ocean and the sky and the other things, the wind and the air and all that. So there's where my freedom comes in. So while I'm putting down the structural elements, the rock or the beach or the gorge or whatever it is, I am much more aware. And then once that's kind of locked into place, then I hope to kind of go to this other place of, again, let's just use meditation for a lack of a better word. And that's when the joy comes in.
But there's two prongs to your kind of trajectory. And so there's the needs of a client, where it might be specific in terms of what it is they're after, that you can still translate into the way you work as a painter. And then there's what I would call, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but what I would call what you do for real. And so when I'm looking at your work, I'm not going to say that they're distinctly different. They're not, because you bring all of the elements of how you approach your work into both of those prongs. But the work that I respond to most strongly is the work that I feel is what really is speaking to who you are, as opposed to providing work for a client. And so I'm just saying that your work is uniformly professional, but I respond more to the images that I feel really come from a very deep place. So how do you toggle back and forth between a commission where clients are saying we want specific things and what you do to release your actual form of expression?
Great question again. I actually come from an illustration background. That's what I studied at university. And so that hired gun mentality, I understand completely, and I'm not against it. I like having paying jobs, but I'm fairly picky, and I usually do things that more and more I would do anyways, or are fairly similar to what I would do anyways. And yeah, I guess it's having those paying jobs from time to time, they do free me up to take more risks in my other work. It'd be like somebody, having a full-time job. But most people who are hiring me to do commissions and different things are hiring me because they do like my other work. And so they kind of want an in-between, something that's representative of whatever it is that they want a picture of, but also with my sensibilities. So I've been pretty lucky.
Okay, because one of the things too is that, and I'm going to bring up the Rorschach inkblot, because you talk about it in your bio. And it's a really interesting kind of springboard in terms of how I look at your work and understand what it is you're exploring. And I would go so far as to say, and I'll defend my position here, that you're effectively being anti-Rorschach. And so here's what I have to say about that is that, so it was, it's a psychological test that was basically about personality characteristics and emotional functioning and the analysis of the perception of the image. And so in defense of what I'm saying about how I apply that to your work is that you don't want to accidentally influence the viewer's response. And I believe that what you want the individual to see is just beauty. Is that so? Am I off base on that?
Not at all. No, it's one of my very favorite things is like when I'll have a painting up in a show and a person will come up to me and say, "Oh my gosh, I totally know where that is. I used to camp there with my grandfather." And then 5-10 minutes later, the next person comes up and says, "Oh my gosh, I know exactly where that is. I proposed to my spouse there." And the next person, and it's totally, none of them are right. It's, it's kind of it's a made up place, or it's a place that's a conglomerate of a number of images. But I like that. I like that everybody gets to approach it with their own history, their own background, their intention, whatever it is they're wanting from the painting. I really like that. One of my very favorite quotes is, "Wherever you go, you take yourself with you." And that's a Neil Gaiman quote from the Graveyard Book. And I really think about that. I think that, when my family and I took a trip around the world for a year, and it didn't really matter where I was, my paintings still ended up looking very much like my work that I do here in the Pacific Northwest. And, and at first I was almost like frustrated, like, well, what's the use of even traveling if I'm just doing the same thing? But I think that's, that coming to that realization that quote that I just said kind of speaks to is very true. And I'm going to backtrack for 1 second and tell a quick story about a friend of mine. Her name is Ramona Youngquist, a wonderful artist here in the Pacific Northwest. And she was doing these paintings of this road, literally, that I would drive on to go to visit my sister, like this road in between us. And her paintings were magnificent and so beautiful. And there I had been driving this road back and forth for years and not appreciating the beauty that was there until Ramona showed it to me. And that just changed everything. That trip became more pleasurable. It became deeper. And, I could see it through a different lens. And like kind of knowing that, like one of my statements about what I want as an artist is to help people see things differently. And I think that's probably all artists. It's probably almost a trite thing to say, but I want people to see the beauty where they may be taking it for granted. And so, that was a long time ago when I first met Ramona Youngquist. I was actually still in college, but that lesson really stuck with me of, oh, look at this ordinary thing, these little suburban parks that we have out here in Beaverton. They're just like one block of kind of a little pocket of nature, a marsh, and they'll have some ducks and grasses. And I'm so drawn to them. I really like them. I like the fact that, 2 blocks from my house in almost every direction, I have one of these little parks, and I can just pop over, do some plein air painting. And then people are just so amazed when they see the paintings that's that little park with the apartment building right next to it and the Nike next to it and everything else. And yeah.
Yeah, well then, okay, then
Cool.
in a way, just to wrap back around this, and the reason I brought up the whole Rorschach thing is because you brought it up in your bio. So the fact that it was in there indicated to me that it was important to you. So I just want to say that one of the things that is inescapable when I say that I believe you to be the anti-Rorschach, because it seems to me that you want individuals to see simply beauty, is that you also negate cultural differences, that you negate the fact that there's needs, that there's base motives, and there's conflict. And all of that stuff is built into the viewer's response to those ink blots. So when I say I believe you're anti-Rorschach, even though you don't characterize it that way in your bio, that's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm seeing, is that you are interested in simply having people analyze the images. The perception of your images is one of beauty. Am I correct on that?
Yeah. That's another thing that I actually say quite a bit, is that I've done something possibly very greedy and strange, but I've built my life around the pursuit of beauty. I travel for beauty. I go hiking for beauty. I spend time looking on, Google Maps for areas that I think may contain beauty. And then I go out and I try to capture pieces of it, elements of it, or, take portions of it that I can include into other paintings. So yeah, beauty to me is very, very important. In one of my very early bios, actually, I wrote that beauty is the language of God. And I in that point, I was thinking about, wildlife, birds and flowers and things like that. But I really think that when I'm, I guess probably all of us, when we're in front of an amazing sunset or a grand, view, that we all feel a closeness to something bigger. And yeah. And I guess also for me, the world does present an ugly face way more often than I, would like. And, in designing my ideal job and my ideal time, my studio space and my time alone, I wanted to be doing something that I enjoy and something that makes me feel good and something that feeds me versus, how the news makes us feel. And so I don't mind my work being a respite and a vacation away from everyday life. And maybe I can help people to be reminded of all the beauty and to look for that beauty. And yeah.
Well, and I hope that I don't sound like I'm trivializing that. That's not the intent at all. It's just your work is there. There's a serenity and there's a kind of profound meditation to all of it. So I want to talk a little bit about your background, because when I was reading about you, there was things that struck me that informs how you do what you do. So you were born in Astoria, and you moved to the Olympic Peninsula, where you were on a Quinault Indian reservation. And the next part of your bio that really struck me was when on your mother's side and you moved to Lebanon, it was the 7th generation of your mother's side to live in Lebanon. So the thing that struck me was the idea of the 7th generation, the great law of the Iroquois Indians, which is you want to think about what your actions do and influence and become part of the next 7 generations down the line. And what really struck me about that is that you are now doing paintings with your daughter. And that to take that whole 7th generation concept to the next step and apply it to you is that having yourself at the center expands the years that you touch one's life. The great-great-grandparent that touches the infant moves everything forward. And to understand one's place, you material touch a part of one's existence. It's a really wide span. So now here is the father working with the daughter. So I'd like you to talk about that.
Yeah. I try to have a hands-off approach to parenting as much as possible, knowing that you can't push a child to do anything. But I've been so very fortunate that my daughter's this perfect kind of mixture of my wife's beauty and brains. And then she picks up on my creativity and joy of color and joy of design and all that. And so she's 15 now, and we literally share a studio. She's sits right behind me. She likes to work on a desk more than on an easel, and I stand up behind her at my easel. And we try to organize times to actually paint together. But a lot of times it's just kind of a nice gift when she just shows up in the studio and sits down quietly behind me and just starts working. And then we have something that we've been doing, which is really interesting because most of her paintings are very abstract, in fact, and with no influence for me. It was so strange that, here she was surrounded by my work and by my friends' work. And she just completely went in her own direction. And I really give her a lot of credit a number of years ago, probably when she was 8, of how liberating that was to me. Just seeing the joy that she was creating with and the abandon, and just that it was literally about the creation, that moment of making that mark and squirting that paint out and pushing it around, and just that, oh my goodness, look what happens when you do this. And, where my work at that point was becoming a little tighter and a little more rehearsed, I guess would be a good way of saying it. And I wanted that joy that I was seeing in her work and in her making that work. And it has been so much fun. And so now we actually work on paintings together quite often. We call our paintings that we do together O2, which stands for 2 Orwicks. And we kind of joke that it's also, the oxygen that we breathe together and everything else. And some of these paintings blow me away just to have a little bit of input into these completely different. They're almost always very abstract. And if they do start as landscapes, that means that I started it. And then she goes in and kind of destroys it in a way and makes it much more organic and beautiful and interesting. I don't know the last time I saw her actually using a paintbrush, except for on watercolors. So she doesn't paint with typical tools. She'll pick up a spatula, a stick, a rock, her fingers, crumpled paper. She loves rollers, painting rollers. She paints with cake, like frosting knives. And it's just crazy to me. Here we are in a studio with probably, 200, 300 different paintbrushes, and she ignores them all and goes to the kitchen instead to get some tools.
That's
Well,
awesome.
now you've got me curious about the chronology of when you said that working with your daughter, that you were liberated to some degree in terms of what you were doing. So what I'm looking at specifically now is your figurative work, and your figurative work appears to be a little bit stiffer than either your landscape, your skyscapes, and your Zen work, with the exception of an image that's called Stage Left. And I guess what I'm asking you is that the period you were doing figurative work, you say that you work on many paintings simultaneously. So I would assume then that all of the figurative pieces came up together. Am I correct on that?
Yes, in that they were all done quite a long time ago. I don't actually do figurative work hardly ever anymore.
Okay, so
it is because it makes me a stiffer, tighter painter, which I'm not enjoying as much.
And that's in a way, that's where I was going with the question, is that when you said that your daughter was helping to liberate you, was the figurative work, was that part of that period, and she moved you out of it, or is it not connected to that body of work?
So a lot of the figurative work is actually probably, like you said, over 10 years old. And so, I'm not as attracted to it for myself. Like when I'm going through my photos and stuff, very rarely am I drawn to the references that I took that have a bunch of figures, or I'll just take the figures out. And that may just be a temporary thing right now. But yeah, a lot of the figurative work, in college and university, I spent so much time studying the figure and anatomy and all those classes, and I did enjoy it. And then when I got into illustration, almost every illustration had a figure in it, or a bunch of figures. And I guess when I kind of moved beyond doing my illustration work into the more of the gallery and fine art stuff, that was kind of a part of the subject matter that I also left behind.
Okay, so it was a natural growth, because if I'm understanding your trajectory correctly, that the Zenscapes, the skyscapes, the landscapes are representational of really not only where you're headed, but what you're really interested in exploring. And it seems to me that a lot of what you're exploring is reflections. There's minimalism built into that. That you're really exploring the emotional side of experiencing the landscape, and that, if I'm correct in where you're at with the work that you're doing now, that you have found a place where it seems to be feeding you very effectively. Am I correct on that?
Thank you. I would hope so, but I think that, like any artist, you always feel like you're on your way to something. I don't think I've ever felt like I've arrived at anything, or like, okay, now I know what I'm going to do for the next, 10 years. It always feels like an exploration. And it is slow sometimes, where, one painting will very much feel like the previous painting and the previous painting and the previous painting. But as a creator, and I know you guys know this as well, that that there's these little changes, that there's these questions that you're asking, there's these elements that you're working on, and things you're slowly developing, and you have to just keep exploring it. So a lot of my work is kind of about questioning and trying different things. And I almost feel like I'm one of those minimalist musicians, where eventually I'll just be pushing, one note, and it'll be this slow drone, but it'll have such a calming feel, like a glass song or something. And yeah,
Philip
exactly.
Glass, is that your?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
But at the same time, I don't, want to just go up and show this canvas is purple. I want it to have some kind of a relationship to reality and some kind of a grounding that people can approach. And then like I used to really, a lot of my friends and really great painters that I admire paint like cityscapes and, urban scenes and urban squalor and all that. And I'm always amazed and I really appreciate their work, but it's just not what I'm after. It's almost like a returning to childhood of growing up in the woods and just, traipsing around the countryside and through the ponds and the creeks and really just kind of being amazed at nature and thinking how beautiful it was and how it was almost magic, right? When you're a little kid and you're cruising around the forest, it almost feels magic. And I want to get back to some of that in my work.
Yeah. Well, and what I want to know, do you split your time evenly between plein air and studio work?
I wish I did. I love plein air painting, but I don't really consider myself a plein air painter. I consider a lot of my time plein air painting just about being out there and taking in that information and making sure that I am staying connected, because it's easy in the studio to, have it exactly the right temperature and the lighting just so. And then all of a sudden you begin to forget what it is that makes nature so natural yeah. And so you want to remember, you want to be a part of it. So I do try to get outside quite a bit.
Well, and will you take smaller plein air paintings and turn them into large scale work? I mean, have you done that?
Generally, yes, I definitely do. And a lot of them just become elements of it. Again, it's just kind of a better way of recording than just photography. And probably all plein air painters will talk about that there's something, everybody likes to say they go out and appreciate the sunset. But when you go out there and paint the sunset from before sunset till well after sunset, and you've watched every element of it, the whole changing, of all the different colors and the different moods and the different feelings, and you just the connection is just that much deeper. Even though you're only capturing just a moment of it, in the end, it's that being out there for hours and communing with it, I guess.
So you're dyslexic, and I'll tell you where I'm going with that question is that, and once again, I pulled some of this information off of your bio that I found really interesting, is that you seem to have gotten in that painting appealed to you because of your dyslexic nature, and that in looking at your paintings, and we'll talk about your chiaroscuro because it's a technique that is developed for emotional tension or psychological effect that you don't use for either one of those reasons, but it's a technique that suits you really well. So at what point did you understand how you would develop your technique in terms of the way your brain works? Was there like an epiphany moment, or was it something that you grew into?
I do remember a number of epiphany moments in painting, both all the way back to college as well as even now, where, you mix two colors that for some reason you hadn't mixed in a certain way and something happens. And so there's a lot. It's I think developing your style is just kind of a collection of 1,000 little epiphanies. And you pick the ones and keep the ones that are valuable to you. How my dyslexia has affected my art is very interesting for sure. And I do feel like I became an oil painter because it's opposite, where you're a lot of times it's dark to light approach, meaning you start with your darks and work towards your lights. And then also the way I'm painting is kind of a subtractive, almost a carving style of painting, where I get in with paper towels and Q-tips and different things like that, and keep building my painting almost like carving.
Michael, here's what I really would like you to talk about, because it's only kind of mentioned in a peripheral way. But boy, there's a lot of information in that peripheral way. Studio everywhere. So you went around the world. You were with children making art in various locations. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. It was something that my wife and I had always talked about doing and kind of thought maybe in our retirement years. And my parents had kind of the same intention in their retirement years. My dad was a doctor, my mom a teacher. So they kind of were going to be the, perfect traveling around, going to different countries and helping where they could and having adventures. But unfortunately, when my dad finally retired, my mother's health was such that they couldn't do it. My mom's not really even capable of leaving the house sometimes. And I guess that's kind of scared us into action in a way. And we also, my daughter was 10 at the time. She turned 11 on the first week of our adventure. And we were just kind of like, she would be really fun to travel with and what a neat experience this would be. So it seemed like fantasy. And then we kind of slowly came up with the idea of what if we actually did art along the way. And then what if we did art with kids in orphanages and different schools? And what if we actually raised money to buy art supplies for these children? And all of a sudden it became just much more realistic somehow. It became about more than just us, about more than just a year-long vacation from reality. It became about giving back in our own way. And it was interesting. We did some fundraising, we raised probably only about $5,000, but that actually goes quite a ways in other countries for buying art supplies and stuff. And we did it. We started making plans. We set, we each got to pick one country that we really wanted to go to. And those were called our pillar countries. My daughter picked Italy because she was super into pizza, and being 10 years old, that made sense. I picked Laos because of, all the adventure movies and those amazing ruins with the head sculptures and everything else. And the vines and the jungles looked amazing to me. And then my wife picked Peru because her lifelong dream had been to do the Machu Picchu hike. And so those became the pillars. And then we kind of filled in the countries around those and planned our trip. And we basically planned our first half of the trip, like actually had the airfare and everything. And it's so great. Like all the different paint manufacturers and brush companies and different things that I talked to about our trip were just excited. Like, how can we help? What can we do? And we had different companies lined up. Gamblin Paints was going to supply all our paints for the trip and everything else. But then we realized we can't actually carry all these supplies. And also kind of started having this feeling of, I don't want to be like, hey kids, look, here's, this family from the US and look at their magical art supplies. And when they're gone, so is your ability to create. And so we changed the plan and basically we bought our supplies locally wherever we were, which was very interesting because, most little places don't have art stores. So there's a lot of, office supply areas and little shops and cobbling things together and, different schools and orphanages. We did different projects because we just didn't know what we were going to get. And we just wanted to show that you could create with whatever it was. I mean, we were really ready to go out and find the biggest leaves we could to, make them into our surface and different things like that. But we never had to. We were always able to find paper or cardboard or poster board. We went to 21 countries total. And we painted with over 500 different kids. And we had them all do the same project, which we was basically a kind of a self-portrait. But how do you see yourself? So it was very, very open-ended. So a lot of kids, saw themselves as almost like their spirit animals. Or when we were in Costa Rica, we painted in an orphanage at the foot of a volcano. And almost every child painted the volcano with their face on it. lots of interesting things. Lots of kids painted themselves as, their ideal job growing up. So, we didn't speak a lot of the languages, so we were kind of reliant on translators and people helping us. And so we don't know ever what got lost in translation or got added in translation. But it was really a lot of fun. And it was really a neat way for my daughter to be around other kids. And it was magical, really. I mean, it was always difficult in the beginning. It was always a lot of work, a lot of running around, a lot of trying to convince people to let us do this project with them. But it was always amazing. In fact, one of the schools in Ecuador, or it was actually another orphanage, a great big one, kind of in a walled off little compound. And we actually had to sneak into it because they said no to us initially. And as we were, heads bowed after being scolded by one of the head nuns that we couldn't do it, we were walking out and we bumped into a gentleman who was walking in, who was going to go teach an English class. And we just said, "Hey, can we join you in your English class? And, just sit in and maybe do some art with your small group of 5 or 6 students." And he thought that was great. So we ran off, got some art supplies, came back, met with him, snuck in around the nuns. And we were meeting with his class, and then all of a sudden another class kind of heard about it and they came and joined us, and then another class, and then we snuck into the cafeteria because it wasn't being used because by this point we had so many kids. And we ended up setting up a gallery in the cafeteria, again hiding the whole time. And probably by this point we had 30 kids with us, and we were hanging their artwork all over the walls. And one nun came in, found us, and was so thrilled. She went off and got the other nuns, and they all came in, and they invited us to come back the next day because they just thought it was such a neat thing that was happening.
Wow.
And
and it must have been really interesting to work with kids who from different cultures who have their own traditions and their own way of seeing and making art. You as a Westerner, it must have been really
Absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah, and it really was. And in the beginning, the first couple of times we did it, I'd always kind of, I just didn't know what was being lost in translation. And so I would do kind of a quick demonstration of, maybe draw an oval and, make it into your face. And I would usually give it my goatee and everything else. And then you'd look out 15 minutes later and all the kids have drawn an oval with a goatee, and, you're like, okay, this isn't working. And they're being restricted. They're copying or mimicking.
Yeah, mimicking.
And so,
yes.
we just kind of stopped giving those demos, but we would kind of walk around, my wife, daughter, and I, or whoever else was helping us, and help out. And especially, there's always going to be a couple shy kids or insecure kids, and you would help out. But we found it to be a lot more liberating for the kids. And it was really interesting. It was interesting to see different levels of energy in their work, different color schemes. Some countries, every boy drew themselves as a soccer star, and every girl drew themselves, as a beautiful big dress and everything. And then it was just really interesting. And we have photos of most all of the paintings. A lot of the places we had intentions of having the kids holding up the portraits so that, they'd be holding it at their chin so you could see the kid's face and then they're painting. But we didn't really realize that a lot of these orphanages, you can't do that. You can't take photos of the children. So then we just have photos of their artwork. So that was kind of sad.
Is there a legal reason for that, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are
superstitious component. I mean, a religious component.
It's usually because of law, and a lot of these kids are not true orphans. They have just been removed from a dangerous situation. And so it may be temporary. It may be that they're waiting for other family to kind of step up and be able to take them. But they just didn't want anything on social media with their face and name saying where they were. So that made sense to us, but it was kind of unfortunate. And so we have a lot of photos where we would try to be pretty strategic about, just the backs of their heads and different things. But and then a lot of places really didn't care. One of our greatest adventures was actually we got to go stay at a orphanage is, again, not quite the right word, in Cambodia, up in the jungle. And it was a working farm that these kids are learning all these skills and going to school and, cooking meals and everything else. And we got to stay for a couple days out there with them and became such amazing friends. I mean, you spend all day, every day with them, making music and playing and swimming and doing all these things that we actually ended up going back a couple weeks later and staying again. And we've stayed in contact with them just because that was just such a neat experience to really get to know a lot of these children on a much more personal basis.
Well, and I imagine when you came back from that trip, you must have been in a very stimulated creative space as a painter yourself. That's what I imagine would have happened.
Definitely. And I had full intention. I talked to my galleries about the fact that I was going to have this travel show, that I was going to do, 15, 20 paintings based on the trip, and that I was going to take it to, from one gallery to the next, for a month or two at a time. And I did that, but the show didn't sell very well, for one. And for two, while I was working on that, it almost began to feel like the commissions again, where I was happy doing it, but I really wanted to be painting the more Zen kind of other stuff that wasn't quite as representational and, specific to.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah. And I just love where I live so much. I love the marshes. And I love
the work that you did coming back from that trip. I mean, it sounds like, what I'm hearing you say is that you shifted into a mode of documentation as opposed to creative expression. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. Is that true?
Absolutely. Man, you are really good at this.
Well, it's just interesting.
No, yeah, it's great. And I actually was just talking on 2 days ago with two friends of mine that we went out plein air painting about how some painters, and sometimes we all are as painters, we can be journalists. And then there's other times where we're just poets, and I am definitely more and more and more leaning towards the poetic side of art versus the journalistic, just the facts, ma'am, trying to get down and make it look like the photo or the reference or the thing. But I did take paints with me the whole trip and did a lot of plein air painting along, lots of little sketches. And so those are still really dear to me. I have those hanging in one of the studios, actually. And in fact, I even sold one right when I got home. And this last year, told the lady to come, she came back and visited the studio, and I told her, you can have any painting in this studio right now if I can have that little sketch back, because it was so important to me. It was such an amazing memory. And so she was great. She got the, a good size, big painting for this couple $100 that she spent on this little sketch. But wow. I don't regret that at all. I'm so glad I got that back. I love it very much.
Well, so then, and just to follow up to this, because it's really interesting, when you came back, did you feel compelled to share your experiences by documenting it, or how did that look? I mean, it sounds to me like you felt the need to share your experience, which then manifested itself in a body of work that became essentially documentation. Is that how that looked?
Yeah, absolutely.
That is so interesting.
Yeah. And then we actually went and gave talks. My daughter's, very gregarious and easygoing on stage, very comfortable. And so we actually gave presentations. We even traveled, I think it was Santa Fe, and gave a talk on a stage. And, it's been interesting in the couple of years since, having people kind of like writing us, hey, I'm in France, I'm traveling around on doing this and that and all that, they'll tell us their adventures and how they saw us give a talk and, followed our adventures, and we inspired them to make the leap and do these things. And so that's been really neat. And yeah, it was definitely really fun to share while we were doing it. It was amazing, thanks to social media, how many people were able to kind of follow along. And I still get questions. Here we are almost 4 years later, and I still get questions from people about it.
Yeah. Wow. That is very, very cool. So, where can we see your work? You're in Cannon Beach, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Dragonfire Gallery. And they've been my longest gallery that I've had. Since the very beginning, they've been with me. And in fact, when I started showing at Dragonfire, it was my illustration work. So a lot more kind of whimsical kids with dragons and fairies and fantasy kind of stuff was what I kind of got my start with. And when they came to pick up work one time, they saw some of my personal work, which was stuff I was doing when I was camping and hiking and traveling. And there was just landscape work. And they asked if they could show some of that. And I always in the back of my mind was thinking, when I retire, this is the kind of work I want to do. This is the paintings I'll do for myself. And they had the show, and my landscape work did quite well, quite quickly. And all of a sudden I was like, man, I get to retire. I didn't really, I probably only painted illustration for about one more year after that. And I've been doing kind of the work heading in this direction ever since. And that was probably 14 years ago. And wow. Dragonfire Gallery I give them a lot of the credit for letting that happen and being so supportive.
Yeah. Standing by you. I mean, that's important. Yeah.
And I think it's really difficult for a gallery that sees sales in one thing to go, yeah, go ahead, just do a 180-degree change and let's just see what happens. And, but they've let me do a couple different shifts in my work. And, very rarely have they come back and said, you know what, we would like some more of the old stuff. It's usually the customers that will say that. But yeah, they've been very supportive. So yeah, I show at Dragonfire Gallery in Cannon Beach. I show at Art Elements Gallery in Newburgh. I show in Portland at Gallery 903, which I think is how we met in the first place with the Secret Gallery. And
pretty sure, yeah.
Yeah, I believe so. And then I've just got picked up by a gallery in North Carolina, which I haven't given them any work. I'll actually have a phone call with the owner probably after we get done with this. And then I show online and do a couple of different things. So yeah, michaelorwick.com and orwickarts.com are two great places to see my work.
Yeah, well, it's been a great pleasure chatting with you. Just your work is great. And at some point we'll get together and we'll have a beer, me, you, and Chris. How does that sound?
I look forward to it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And as always, Chris, thank you so much for choreographing this.
Yeah. Thank you, Philip. This has been fun.
Yeah. So, Michael, take care.
Thank you so much.